Hello everybody, I hope you're all well. So today we're going to have a go at doing an abstract background on this blank canvas that I've prepared with Eco Gesso. Now this was a canvas that I found in a charity shop that was a photo print canvas. So I've used this Eco Gesso, which is a plastic-free gesso from a company called Natural Earth Paint. It's done an okay job, but it hasn't been great at covering this particular one. I have an issue here, so I'm going to try mixing some of the Eco Gesso with some inks, and I'm just going to go to town and do some abstract work on there and see what happens. So wish me luck, let's see what happens. So I've got here my oak gall ink that is nice and aged. Just going to give it a little stir. I have some of my ochre watercolour, a couple of ochres. I've put some of the natural gesso into this bowl, and I just want to see what happens if I mix a little bit of it with the walnut ink, just to age it a little bit, really. Ooh. So you can see it's made it go a nice kind of creamy. And all I'm going to do is just start making some marks, really. I actually quite like it as this light background, so I might just continue with that a little bit. I like how it's kind of drying in some places, but not so much in others. And I haven't used any water yet. It's actually making quite a nice background. I quite like that. I'm going to add a little bit of water now and just a touch more ink. Just to give it just to change it up a little bit. I have no plan for this. I'm going to take some fresh ink and I'm just going to start taking some brush strokes through there randomly. Because I want this to have a kind of a feel of a moody sky. Now I'm just going to take my spray water and just see if I can get some drips. There you go, you see? Add a little bit of ink onto there in a kind of a splattery effect. It's quite warm in here today, so the ink's drying. I'm going to add a little bit more water. I'm just going to throw the ink there as well. Yeah, that's good. And then I'm going to carry on mixing it with the Eco Gesso there, where it's, just going to add a little bit more water it down a bit. when it brushes through the canvas like that. And some moss just suddenly appeared and got attached to it. I don't know where that came from. I'm going to just go in now. I'm going to mix some of the watercolour in, and the reason that I haven't used a really huge brush is because the watercolour's in this tiny pot, and that's just not going to happen. I'm trying to get a huge brush in that tiny pot, but otherwise a big brush would be a lot better for coverage. Yeah, I'm just going to see, that just gives a nice little bit of warmth there. Now what I did just then was actually scrape off a section of the paint accidentally, but I actually quite like how that works, and I might do some of that. And I quite like how when you go over the walnut oil, it leaves these pale streaks. I think I'm going to get another colour. And a smaller brush, and I'm just going to add some nice little streaks. And then I'm going to blur them out with a bigger brush. Yeah, that's nice. Still using the same colour at the moment. But there's certain areas of the canvas that haven't really been covered that well by the Eco Gesso. So this is just helping to cover those a little bit better. I have a kind of a darker brown shade there. Where are you? Oops, she says, dropping it on the floor. So I'm going to take another brush again. And this one tends to be really, really dry, because when I made this paint up, I used too much vegetable glycerin, and now the paint actually dries out a little bit too quickly. I'm going to splatter this one just on those areas there. Because I haven't got a background that I've used this paint to splatter with, so let's just see what happens. I'm also going to make some random little shapes just by twizzling the brushes. And just where that, I'm just going to blur that out. And just tilt that painting up a bit. And you can see it running down like that, which is really nice. I'm just going to take it off there. A lot of these areas will be covered up when I paint the actual tree, which is similar to how I'm doing this one. So we're getting quite a good effect. Quite happy with that so far. Well, what I might do now is just add some white, just some of the plain Eco Gesso. I'm going to see if I can splatter it with white. Yeah, quite like that. I'm going to go this way this time. I'm going to turn the canvas around. I'm going to mix it with whatever paint is there left. And just do some white streaks randomly. There's certain areas that just will not hold the paint. It's really frustrating. So I'm going to really wet them. Just do some scrumbling. I'm just putting my brush and just turning it around just to get like a slightly wavy lines, because it can just, I want this background to kind of have an impression of foliage in the background. I'm just going to brush up some of these. I want it to be slightly lighter in the middle where I'm painting the main tree anyway, so I'm just going to lighten off some of those areas. And it kind of looks like clouds, and I don't like those, so let's go over that. Clouds and storminess. See, now we've got this big white blue patch there, which will not paint over. Can you see? So I'm going to have to do is let that dry, because the more, because I've gone wet on wet, the more I've added on top of it, the more it's lifted it. So if I let that dry, I should be able to go over it. But otherwise, for a quick work, I think I'm pretty happy with that background. It's pretty moody. It's got a few different colours and textures in it. And I don't want it too complicated, because I want the tree to be the main piece. I'm going to have to try and fix this piece though when it dries, otherwise I won't be able to paint the tree over it and I'll just have a big blue hole. So, but I added too much water, that's why it's lifted. So with the Eco Gesso, you have to use a layer of cellulose glue, which you have to let dry, and then you apply the gesso in 2, 3 or 4 coats, however many coats you want, which is what I've done. But for some reason there's just certain areas where it's just doesn't want to stay, so we'll just have to see what I can do. I've had this similar problem with other pieces and I've managed to fix it, so I think I've just overworked that piece, so we're going to persevere and then repair once it's dry. That's all for this week, I think. So I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you again next week. Have a great week, everybody.